All right, so peace. This is another good segment that I caught. It's starring or focused around the new Secretary of the Treasury named Steve Mnuchin, I believe his name is. He was appointed the Secretary of Treasury under Donald Trump. He came on to the CBS Morning News to discuss his tax plan, his tax cutting plan, and his plan to try to correct the $20 trillion deficit in the next however many years that he is in office. So, I figured that it would be a good segment because I could also talk about some of the issues with the American economy. A lot of brothers ask me about the banking system and the economic system. So this would be a good opportunity to kind of discuss that. So I'm going to chime in as they talk.
Charlie. I'm Charlie Rose with Gail King and Nora O'Donnell. President Trump says his tax plan will put Americans back to work, but many important details are missing from his one-page blueprint for big corporate and personal tax cuts. The plan would reduce 7 personal income tax.
Damn, Charlie, what the hell Charlie choking on? Somebody better get that man his milk.
Personal income tax brackets to 3. The rates would be 10, 25, and 35%. But the income levels for those brackets were not announced.
The president wants to double the standard deduction most taxpayers use. He would also eliminate the estate tax and the alternative minimum tax. That benefits wealthy Americans like the president. The plan would slash the corporate tax rate from 35% to 15%. It's unclear how the administration would make up for lost revenue without adding to the nearly $20 trillion national debt.
Now, you see, that's the first time, that's one of the rare times that they will actually mention the $20 trillion deficit or debt that America is in, or that the United States is in, I should say, because there is a difference. But they never mention that on these shows when they're going on and on about all of these irrelevant issues in America. The only issue that's pertinent is the $20 trillion debt that America's in. Now, you see that the fourth bullet point states unclear how cuts will be paid for. There's only 2 ways to pay for debt. All right. And that's through war. And that's through the legitimizing of actual natural resources as exchangeable money or lawful money, that being gold and silver. So they're either going to have to make gold and silver lawful money again, or they're going to have to wage wars. All right.
Speaking to reporters at the White House yesterday, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin and economic advisor Gary Cohn made it clear that the blueprint is heavy on to be determined.
When we have an agreement, we will release the details and go through it with all of you.
It's going to mean a tax cut. We will let you know the specific details at the appropriate moment.
And there's lots and lots of details that will going into how that will pay for itself.
When he said how it's going to pay for itself, he's talking about the income that they're going to get from waging wars. All right. That's how America pays off its creditors. They wage wars, and then they get you as a U.S. citizen to pay off the debt. All right. So they bring the natural resources back to America, and they basically try to make it monetizable, whether it be drugs or what have you. By having the drugs get sold by couriers, they bring in spices or they bring in natural resources like petroleum, and they try to convert them into usable material. And they try to work off the debt that they owe to the international bankers or to the Federal Reserve by having you work off the debt. All right. You are the collateral because there is no money. All right. A lot of brothers don't understand that there is no gold or silver backing the money that's used. Right. What we use is called fiat money, meaning a stand-in or good enough money. OK, when you take out that dollar or that $5 bill or that $20 bill, there's no difference between that and a regular piece of loose leaf paper. The only difference is that Congress basically has legitimized it by recognizing it, and they have to recognize it because America is a servant to the Federal Reserve. All right, Federal Reserve is just a front for the international bankers. That's all it is. Federal Reserve is a private bank. They are able to print money. According to the U.S. Constitution, the Congress cannot print money. It can only coin money. So when Franklin Delano Roosevelt wrote the executive order in 1933, to take all of the gold out of circulation, what he basically was doing was a favor to the international bankers. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a pawn. They call him one of the greatest presidents in history. He's probably one of the most corrupt presidents to ever ascend to the White House, and that's saying a lot. All right, that man was corrupt all the way from the start. I believe he started off as the assistant secretary of the Navy. In that capacity, he helped start World War I. Like I said, he was Confederate with, what's this cat name in Britain? I don't know why his name slipped my mind right now. Winston Churchill. He was Confederate with him in sinking the Lusitania, allegedly, which created the pretext for America to join into World War I. Then he tried to slither his way into the White House. I believe it was in 1920, but he lost. I think he lost to a Harding or Coolidge, one of those guys. I think it was Warren Harding. And then later on, when he did come into the White House in 1932, the first thing he did was get rid of the gold standard. All right, that guy's hands was dirty. And then after that, he brought in all those socialist reforms like the New Deal. The New Deal basically was like the Obamacare of its day, for those of you who don't know, or the Great Society reform under Lyndon B. Johnson. Those were basically reforms to get the people more into a debt slave mindset, right? He brought in things like welfare, things of that nature, using the Great Depression as a pretext to bring it in. All right. The Great Depression was an economic event that was staged to allow Roosevelt into the White House, to justify bringing him into the White House. And he ran on a ticket of exalting the gold standard. But as soon as he came in, he got rid of it. Why? Because he was a pawn of the international bankers. All right. When you have gold circulating in your society, that allows your money system to be stabilized. When you take the gold out, now the international bankers through the Federal Reserve can establish how much the money is worth because they print the money. All right. When you're printing money without enough gold or silver back in the money, that creates what's called inflation. All right, brothers. All inflation is when you print money, is when you print paper money with no actual money backing it. Real money is gold and silver. So when there's no real money backing the paper money, that creates inflation. That's why prices go up. It's not the value of the item that you're buying that goes up. The value of the money is going down. All right. That's how they manipulate societies. That's how they brought in the Federal Reserve in the first place. All right. What they did in the early part of the 20th century. Going all the way back to the 1790s, and I covered this on the American Revolution video. Alexander Hamilton, he was the secretary of the first National Bank of America for 20 years, right? That had the 20-year charter. That expired in 1811. So they brought in the War of 1812 because the international bankers, they wanted America to renew the charter for the national bank. So then you brought in the second national bank, right, in 1812. Now, Andrew Jackson understood the power of the national bank and how it was destroying and crippling the American economy. So he pledged to get rid of it. That's why they tried to have him killed. He made a quote. He said that the national bank is trying to kill me, but I'm going to kill the national bank. That is why Trump made the statements that he made about Andrew Jackson. And I'm going to cover that later on when he said that Andrew Jackson could have solved the Civil War, because basically what Trump was saying was that the Civil War was caused by the international bankers wanting to bring in a national bank into America. That was the tactic that they used back in the 1800s because America didn't want a national bank. So what they would do is they would try to cause wars. Every time they wanted to have the charter for the national bank renewed, they would try to cause a war. All right. First, it was the War of 1812. That worked. After that, Jackson shut it down in 1832. And it wasn't until the 1860s that they tried to bring it in again. And Abraham Lincoln went against it. So they had him killed through the conspiracy involving what's this cat name? John Wilkes Booth. All right. Who they allowed to escape, but they make you think that they killed him. No, they allowed him to escape. All right. Because what's his name was Confederate in that. the Secretary of Defense, or I believe he was known at that time as the Secretary of War. I believe his name was Edwin Stanton. He allowed him to escape. All right, but that's neither here nor there. After the normal ploys that the bank would use, that the international bankers would use of trying to start a war, after those ploys failed, those tactics failed, their new tactics in the early 1900s was to try to destabilize the economy by causing bank runs. Basically, what a bank run is when you cause a panic by making the people who deposit money in the bank, you make them think that the bank doesn't have enough money to cover the amount of money that they deposited. So basically, the people will go and they would take their money back out of the bank, and that will cause the banks to call back in the loans that they'd made to people to purchase houses and things, or start businesses. All right. When the people will go to give their money back, that will cause the value of the property that they bought to go down. So the private bankers that were in on it, they would buy back all the property that was defaulted on. They'd buy it back for cheap because the value of the property went down. All right. And that would cause a destabilization in the American economy. So that's what caused the pretext for the Federal Reserve Act, which is what came in 1913. All right. So that's why we have in America what's known as a Federal Reserve, which is basically just a private banking institution. All right. So Roosevelt, that pawn in 1933, he brought in the coup de grace when he got rid of the gold standard. All right. Roosevelt also knew about the bombing of Pearl Harbor beforehand. I think I mentioned that before. Allegedly. All right. Everything I'm saying is alleged. All right. So he knew about all that stuff. You know, that guy, and the reason why they bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan was because those were the two Christian centers. Those were the two cities in Japan where you had the most Japanese Christians. All right. They don't like the so-called Christian religion amongst the banking circles. They want everybody communist, meaning atheists. All right. It's easier to take their money that way. But anyway, at least from a international and from a banking perspective, it's easier to take their money that way. OK, but let's get back to Steve Mnuchin and let's see what he's talking about. The only way to repair the issues with the economy is to bring back the gold and silver standard and get rid of the Federal Reserve. That's it. All right. But let's see what they have to say.
We will get back to you with definitive answers on all these details.
We're going to move this as fast as we can, and when we have an agreement, we will release the details and go through it with all of
What's
you.
my second question?
Secretary Mnuchin is with us from the Treasury Department. Good morning, Mr. Secretary.
Good morning. It's great to be here with you. Thank you.
Great to have you here. As you mentioned, this would be historic tax cuts estimated to cost the American taxpayer $7 trillion over a decade.
And you guys have to understand something also. In this society, you cannot make a payment. All you can do is levy a tax. Everything is just a tax. It's not a payment. You can't pay anything because you have no money. All right. Really, the U.S. Department of Treasury, the Secretary of Treasury is supposed to even out everybody's debt because they took away our ability to pay back debts when they took away the gold and the silver. All right. Everything is just a promise to pay. That's why when you look at your money, it's called a note. All right. All a note is a promise to pay. All a bond is a promise to pay. All right. So the international bankers, the system that's been set up is that the money is just a or what we use, what's called fiat money is just a promise to pay. But the actual money is you. All right. The person is the money because they're the collateral. The energy that they use in their lifetime to work and perform a duty is what's going to pay off the debt. All right. You are the actual executor of the promise to pay. That's why, like I said before, when you join the military or if you get incarcerated, they give you that prison number that they give you as a bond number. All right. So basically, when cats get locked up and they put you to work, you're performing a service. You're actually on the stock exchange. All right. That's another thing that Roosevelt brought in was the Security and Exchange Commission. All right. He was nothing but a pawn of the international bankers. That's all he was. All right. He brought that in. He brought in the New Deal. He brought in a few other things that's slipping my mind at this moment. All right. But all this stuff is just a system that has been set up and executed, that they've been trying to execute for many years, and that they finally brought into fruition in the early 1900s. And right now it's coming back to bite them. All right. It's coming back to bite them because the system that they create when it's a credit-based system is never going to work very long. That's why if you read the Bible, I know a lot of you brothers don't believe in the scriptures, but it is what it is. You know, one of the provisions in the economic system that the Most High set up was not to lend by usury. Because, you know, when you lend by usury, that's a biblical term or an old English term for credit. When you constantly do that, what it does is it destabilizes your economy. All right. That's why the scriptures tell you that the love of money is the root of all evil. It destabilizes everything. You're not supposed to do that. All right. So every 7 years, you'd have what's known as a year of release, where if you owed someone money, the debt was forgiven. Because if you don't forgive debts, everyone's going to be in debt and everybody's going to be working off debt for the rest of their life, as opposed to being able to do things that are actually fruitful. All right. But under the Constitution, the Secretary of the Treasury is actually supposed to pay off everybody's debt. All right. But as we know, they don't do that. That's why I state that every person in America is a debt slave. Your job is to work off the debt to fulfill the, you know, what's owed to the international bankers.
So when will you tell us how you'll pay for it?
Well, let me first say this is about the most sweeping, biggest tax cuts and sweeping tax reform in history.
Yeah, everything is just a deduction. When you get money back from the IRS, that's based on deductions. It's not a payment. You could say that you got paid, but you really got a deduction. All right. If the deduction is in the negative, then you know that's what you get sent back. If it's in the positive, then that's what you have to pay. All right. But everything has to equal zero at the end of the day.
And the president is focused on creating economic growth. This is all about economic growth and American jobs.
Economic growth means more wars. That's all it means. If they're not talking about bringing back the gold and silver standard, when they say economic growth, that means more wars. That's why you hear about all this stuff with Korea. All right. They want to take out Korea right now. Supposedly, Kim Jong-un, he wants to negotiate with Trump. Why is that? Because probably, you know, behind the scenes, Trump has forwarded word to him that, look, we'll send a nuke over there. All right. We'll nuke you. But we want to get to those tungsten mines again, and we want to get to the multi-trillion-dollar spice mines that you have over there in Korea, and the natural resource mines. They have high amounts of I believe was it magnesite or magnesium? I can't remember. It slipped my mind right now. But Korea is very, very high in natural resources, very high.
And that's what the president is committed to. In regards to the pay-fors, I don't know how people could estimate the costs since we haven't released all the details, but this is going to be paid for by economic growth and by a reduction of many, many deductions and special interests.
You see that? Everything is just about deductions, brothers. There's no such thing as a payment. They cannot pay you. There's no money to pay you. All right. All the gold was sent to the Federal Reserve in 1933. All right. There's no gold. There's no gold. You're not getting paid. What you get is a deduction. All right. You get a promise to pay. That's all money actually is. That's why now everything is electronic. Right. Soon they're going to want to roll out that RFID chip. All right. That's what's next on the horizon. But they're trying to figure out a way to make it more acceptable for the American sheep. All right. They're trying to figure out a way to make it more palatable, more acceptable, because the chip has been demonized by the Bible. Right. Where it's known as the mark of the beast. So they're trying to figure out a way like, damn, how could we make this more acceptable? So they're probably going to have to stage some type of massive traumatic event to scare the people into taking that chip. All right. But, you know, that's what happened in Germany at the end of World War I in the Treaty of Versailles. You had all the big time bankers. They basically wanted to set up a pretext for World War II because they already had that already planned out. Like I said, war is big business. So you had who was there at the meeting? You had a lot of big time bankers there. Mandel House was there. The Warburgs were there. All right. When I say the Warburgs, I mean Paul Warburg, who was the president of the Federal Reserve, and Max Warburg. He's the one who handled the finances in Germany. A few other guys were there who slipped my mind right now. But in the Treaty of Versailles, basically what they laid out was that Germany had to pay back all the countries that defeated Germany in World War I. The Treaty of Versailles basically stated that Germany had to pay those countries back for all the money that they had spent. And that put Germany in such a massive economic hole where they owed in the quintillions, right? For those of you brothers who don't know, quintillion is like when you take a trillion and the next level is a quadrillion, and then it's a quintillion. All right. Germany was in the quintillions in debt. And this was back in the 20s. All right. Totally destroyed their economy. That created the pretext for Hitler to come in. All right. That's why they were so receptive to Hitler, because they felt like they had been done dirty. All right. But that was set up from the Treaty of Versailles. They wanted a World War II. All right. They already, like I said, Hitler was already being trained to take over in Germany. All right. Hitler was trained by MI5, Theosophical Society, Fabian Society. All right. He was sent into Germany to do what he did. But that's another story for another day.
Why put it out now, Mr. Secretary?
And Hitler was a illegitimate child of the Rothschilds. Right. Real last name Schicklgruber.
Secretary, without all of the details.
I think the American public wanted to hear about it. And, this is something we've been talking about since the campaign.
Mr. Secretary,
The American public didn't want to hear this bullshit.
the question is, what kind of economic growth do you have to have in order to pay for the tax cuts, the massive tax cuts you're recommending?
Easy. War. You already know that, Charlie. Your fake ass. You was at the meeting when they decided that. You a member of the Council of Foreign Relations. Stop getting on TV trying to act like you don't know how they're going to try to pay back, or justify these tax cuts with your with your purple tie on.
Well, we feel confident that we can get to at least 3% economic growth on a sustained basis.
When?
And that's something we've said, and that's something that we're confident with. And the American economy has been held back, and this is about unleashing economic growth. It's a combination of the tax plan, it's the combination of regulatory relief, and it's the combination of our trade principles. And those three are what are going to create economic growth that's been held back in this country.
The Republican Party is famous for being against debt and deficits.
How could you be against debt and deficits, but you're not against the Federal Reserve? The Federal Reserve is what's creating the debt. All right. Very, very simple. Like I said, all inflation is the printing of the money with no gold or silver backing it. That's all it is. So anybody who says that they're against debt, but they're not against the Federal Reserve, you're full of shit.
President, less so. What impact is it going to have on deficits over a 10-year period?
Well, again, Charlie, I think the president is very concerned that the debt has grown from $10 to $20 trillion under the last administration, and that's something we're very conscious of.
Because they're printing too much money. Right? When they had that bailout back in 2008, like I said before, that was another sanctioned decimation of the American economy via the banks. That's why the banks always get bailed out. All right, because they're the ones that's really controlling America. All right, these little banks, they're subsidiaries of the major banks. The major banks are what's running America. All right.
And as we go through the details of the plan, we'll be comfortable that we can pay for most of the plan. And that's something we'll be looking at when we report the 10-year numbers.
So what are you going to do about American corporations that have a lot of cash, or not cash so much, but a lot of earnings stowed away in?
You see how he changed it from cash to earnings? Because the corporations know that the money doesn't mean anything. All right. The money is worthless. So they have to change it from cash to earnings, because it's basically just electronic representations of what you have. That's all it is. The paper money doesn't mean anything.
In places around the world and not bringing it back because of taxes.
Well, Charlie, it's not a surprise that people have left trillions of dollars offshore, given the complexity of our system and the way it works. And we've spoken to hundreds of...
It's not really that complex when you understand what the goal is. The goal is for you to trick all the regular simpletons and take all the money for yourself. All right, that's why you're Secretary of Treasury now. You were a former banker. You know how the system works, man. Let's knock it off.
Of business executives, we're going to have a one-time tax for repatriation, and we expect that we'll get trillions of dollars back on shore, and that will be invested in American capital and American jobs, and that's what this is all about.
You say it will create more jobs. How so?
They keep asking him the same question because they want him to give a real answer, but he can't give a real answer. The only way for it to bring any type of monetary value back into the American economy is through war, because they're not going to get rid of the Federal Reserve. They're just not.
Is about creating jobs, because many surveys show that 70% or more of the tax burden is borne by the American worker. And this is about
all of the tax burden is borne by the American worker. He's a debt slave. All right. When you're born and you get your birth certificate, that's a bond that's issued on you. All right. That bond accumulates value based on what they prognosticate your work value is, meaning how much work you're going to put in. Like I said, you are the money. All right. When they give you the Social Security number, or when you file for that Social Security number, when your parents create it for you, that creates a trust. All right. They create a trust in your name based on the amount of work that you do. You cannot touch that money. That money is worth in the billions. That gets cycled into your state economy. All right. That goes back to the state in the form of what they call block grants. OK, you are worth billions as a human being, because once again, there's no gold or silver backing anything that these people do. So you are the money. You are the collateral for the debt. That's it. It's not that difficult to understand. So a lot of you guys is always asking about what the solution is. I'm a believer in the scripture, so I already know what the solution is for me. But for you regular cats that don't believe in the Bible, your solution should be that you should be telling these politicians to go back to the gold and silver standard and get rid of the Federal Reserve. All right.
This is about putting money back in the American worker's pocket, and this is about investing more money in plant and equipment to build American plants and create American jobs.
Mr. Secretary, as you know, a lot of the reports and a lot of the reporting on this says this is a lot of tax cuts for the rich. And if that is portrayed as such, you'll have a tough time in Congress.
He ain't gonna have no tough time. All them guys in Congress are the rich. What you talking about, man? Your lying ass.
Well, Charlie, as I've said before, the president's objective is about tax simplification, and we will be lowering the rate on the high end in return for eliminating almost all deductions. We're committed to keeping charitable deductions and mortgage interest, but everything else is on the table, and this is about tax simplification. It's also about creating economic growth and having people invest.
And you have the Republicans in Congress on board?
We do. We've had lots of discussions with the leadership in the House and Senate. We've been meeting weekly. I think the good news is conceptually we all agree on the plan, and we're committed to work out the details together.
Secretary.
How could y'all all agree on the plan if you haven't worked out the details? Man, please.
Mnuchin, good to have you this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure. Your lying ass. Look, man, it's very, very simple. They don't really know what to do, because it's reaching a point now where the bubble's getting to where it's about to burst. You have a $20 trillion debt. They cannot get rid of that debt. It's not possible. All right. It's like a junkie who owes money to the dealer. Right. They have to duck the dealer. If they know if the dealer finds them, the dealer's going to shoot them. All right. That's the predicament that America's in right now. So they have to either demand a disintegration of the Federal Reserve, or they're going to have to find a way to make the people of America more efficient debt slaves. How will they possibly do that? Who knows? Maybe stage something, create a pretext where people have to get the RFID chip, right? They have to be able to make sure that they can account for every dollar that's spent. The easiest way to do that is to make everything electronic. All right.
And a reminder, CBS.
But anyway, that's it on that segment. Peace.